His obsession begins when you stop caring. Carl Jung: most women have no idea the moment they hold all the power. It doesn't come dressed in roses or recognition. It doesn't arrive with applause. It enters quietly when she finally lets go, when she withdraws her energy from the endless loop of proving, pleasing, and performing for his attention. When the chase is over, not because she's tired, but because she sees through it. That's when it begins, his obsession. Not during the days she texted first, not when she asked him to open up, not in the hour she explained herself over and over like a song on repeat. No, it begins when the mirror she once held up to his ego is shattered, when she walks away, not out of spite, but out of sight. You see, a man doesn't realize what you mean to him when you're available on command. His unconscious mind is a labyrinth of projections, illusions, and shadows, many of which he does not own. He chases what he cannot have. He yearns for what slips through his fingers. The moment a woman detaches truly, not performatively, not theatrically, but with the sacred quiet of someone who has remembered herself, the alchemy begins. Carl Jung spoke of the Anima, the inner feminine in a man's psyche, often projected onto the women he encounters. She becomes his muse, his tormentor, his addiction, his salvation, not because of who she is, but because of what she represents within him. He does not yet know her as she truly is. He knows only his own fragmented soul through the veil of her mystery, and as long as she dances to keep his gaze, she plays into the projection. But when she stops, when she refuses to be reduced to a role in his theater, when she detaches from the need to be seen through his eyes, that's when the spell reverses. This is not a game. This is not about manipulation. This is about awakening. The moment you stop caring, really stop it, means you've stopped anchoring your value in his ability to reflect it. You've taken the projection off the wall and handed it back to him. This was never mine, you'd say, silently. This was your unfinished business, your mother wound, your neglected Anima, your fear of the feminine. And suddenly, he is left with nothing but himself. That's when he begins to see you for the first time. Because obsession is not born in comfort, it is born in absence. When the source of emotional supply is cut off, the psyche, he tries to resurrect you in memory, in fantasy, in shadows. He revisits old messages. He stalks your digital footprints. He replays every moment he dismissed you, every glance he ignored, every whisper he shrugged off. He is not in love with you. He is in love with the space you once filled, now hollow, echoing, and you are no longer the reflection of his needs. You are the flame that no longer flickers for him. You are the feminine returned to herself. You are Persephone walking out of the underworld, not because Hades let you go, but because you remembered the spring was always inside you. Women are taught to earn love, to keep a man interested, to keep the spark alive. But the truth, the deep, brutal, liberating truth is that real desire cannot be maintained through effort. It is not sustained by sacrifice. It is invoked by mystery, not martyrdom. A man cannot obsess over a woman who obsesses over him. He becomes enthralled only when she becomes an enigma again, when her silence says more than her sentences ever did. Have you ever noticed how his eyes soften only when you stop explaining? How he starts texting when you stop checking? How he suddenly wants to talk when your voice has already gone quiet? This is not coincidence. This is ancient wiring. This is the Anima calling him back to himself through the absence of you. The Stoics knew this detachment. We suffer more in imagination than in reality, said Seneca. And oh, how he suffers now. Not because you're cruel, but because you've become a mirror he can no longer look into without seeing his own void. You stopped caring, not because you're broken, but because you're done breaking yourself. You stepped out of the archetype of the savior, the nurturer, the endlessly understanding goddess, and you walked into the wild woman, the sovereign one, the version of you that knows. He is not your home. He is not your destiny. He is not the measure of your worth. And that is when he starts to lose his mind.
He cannot name it. He doesn't know why your absence consumes his mind like wildfire licking dry wood. He tells himself he's fine, that that there are others easier, softer, more available women to distract him. And maybe he tries, but none of them taste like you. None of them haunt like you, because none of them required him to become more. You were never simply a woman to him. You were the confrontation of his unconscious. You touched something raw, something unformed, something buried. You pulled it up without even knowing. That's what the feminine does when she is in her power. She doesn't chase. She doesn't force. She invokes. She holds him a road to the unfinished boy within the man and says, grow. or go. Most men will go. Only those brave enough to walk through the fire of their own inadequacies will stay. And even then, they must lose you first. They must taste the abyss where your affection used to be. They must watch the woman who once bent backward now walk forward without looking back. Only then does something ancient stir inside them the real man. The one hiding beneath bravado and avoidance and charm. That man is born in the ruins of your indifference. This is what the mystics call the dark night of the soul. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole. And for many men, it begins the moment she no longer tolerates their fragmentation. The moment she no longer serves as the emotional crutch for a man unwilling to walk. He cannot tell the difference at first, between love and obsession, between needing you and knowing you. He thinks it's about the texts, the time, the attention, but what he craves is something deeper. He wants the part of himself that you reflected, the tenderness, the intensity, the mystery. He wants himself, but doesn't know it. Not yet. And you must let him burn. You must resist the urge to return simply because he finally notices. His obsession is not yet transformation. It is the beginning, not the destination. Let him sweat in the silence. Let him spiral. Let him ache. If he cannot face that ache without dragging you back into it, he is not ready. You have nothing to prove. You are not required to explain your silence to a man who ignored your voice. You are not obligated to console the one who shattered your softness. You owe nothing to the storm you once calmed. It is not cruelty to protect your peace. It is not arrogance to know your value. It is not selfishness to demand reciprocity where there was only consumption. In fact, it is necessary, sacred, divine. And as he walks through his personal purgatory wrestling with the realization that he lost something real, not because you stopped loving him, but because you started loving yourself. More you rise. Slowly, you reroot in the soil of your own becoming. You reclaim the fragments you gave away like gifts to the undeserving. You become whole, not because he sees it, but because you do. The woman who stops caring is not numb. She is not jaded. She is not cold. She is clarified. She has cried the last tear. She has screamed the last explanation. She has begged the last time. And in that stillness, she is reborn. And what of him? He begins to see what he couldn't see before. That you were not just a woman. You were a revolution, a reckoning, a wild and terrible beauty that demanded truth, not performance. And he failed to rise to meet it. Now, the question echoes in his unconscious. What was it about her that I could not hold? The answer is simple. She required you to be whole. And you, watching from afar, knowing your silence is louder than any poem, any plea, simply continue forward. You are no longer the story told through his eyes. You are the author of your own myth. Somewhere in the marrow of his being, a cold awareness sets in one he cannot shake. It arrives not with thunder, but in the mundane, in the quiet space between meetings, in the flash of your laughter caught on an old voicemail, in the way another woman speaks, and somehow it isn't you. He starts to see it in the eyes of others how none of them hold that same storm, that same refusal to be dimmed. He begins to realize you weren't trying to be loved. You were just being fully, wildly, unapologetically. And that terrified him. It always does. To a man uninitiated into his own depths, a woman who has done her shadow work is a threat, not because she's cruel, but because she cannot be controlled. She cannot be emotionally manipulated, breadcrumbed, or baited into performing for scraps. She is the archetype of the sovereign feminine, tamed, radiant, whole. She mirrors back, not what he wants to see, but what he needs to face. His fear of rejection, his addiction to comfort, his refusal to evolve. And so he pushed you away, not because he didn't want you, but because having you meant facing himself, and he wasn't ready. He wanted the warmth without the fire, the softness without the sword, the muse without the mirror. But now you are gone, and the part of him that truly could love you, the man, beneath the masks, starts to awaken. Slowly, through the realization that he was given the sacred, and treated it like something replaceable. This is where many women break. Right here, at the first sign of his obsession. He comes back with poetry now, with sorrow in his tone, with new language about feelings, vulnerability, about working on himself. And it's tempting. It always is. Because part of you once bled just to hear him say what he's saying now. But you must remember, obsession is not redemption. It is the smoke before the fire of true change. And until that fire burns away his patterns, his ego, his comforty, he's still not ready. You are not here to complete a man. You are not the final stage in his emotional evil. You are the invitation, the spark, the portal. That is his. And you are no longer waiting on the other side of that work. This is the sacred paradox of feminine empowerment. When you stop caring, you don't become less become emotionally sovereign. You no longer outsource your worth to his validation. You no longer make his confusion your crisis. You no longer turn yourself into a bridge just to make sure he doesn't drown in his own avoidance. The woman who detaches isn't hard. She's wise. She has seen what it costs to carry love like a burden, and she chooses, instead, to wear it like a crown. And that shift rearranges everything. Now, you become the mystery. Not because you are playing hard to get, but because you are no longer trying to be gotten. You live for yourself. You belong to yourself. And that self-possession, that quiet fire, draws him in like a moth. Not to consume you, but to be consumed by what you've become. Still, you remain unmoved, not unfeeling, unwilling to lose yourself again in the drama of his discovery, unwilling to play therapist, teacher, or martyr. You do not entertain half-grown love. You do not nurse broken masculinity at the cost of your own essence. You do not build kingdoms where your soul is taxed for every brick. Because you know something now, don't you? You know what it feels like to be free. Not alone but free. To wake up and not wonder how to be more digestible. To speak and not shrink. To exist without explaining your existence. That is the revolution. That is the prize. That is the end of obsession from your side. And him? He must sit with the echo of your absence. He must choose, evolve, or repeat. Become whole or forever. Chase the pieces of you he was too blind to honor. Let him chase. There is a moment in every man's journey when the illusion finally cracks. He thought he could replace you. He believed your silence was a bluff. He told himself it was just a phase, that you'd come back as they all do. But the longer the quiet stretches, the louder the truth becomes. You're not waiting anymore. You are not on pause. You are not checking his social media. You are not lying awake, replaying his words. You have stepped out of the game entirely. This breaks something inside him, because your departure wasn't dramatic. You didn't scream. You didn't plead. You didn't collapse into apology. He simply stopped responding, stopped explaining, stopped caring. And that's what wounds him most, not your anger, but your indifference. Not your rage, but your rebirth. The woman who is detached is the most dangerous force a man will ever encounter. Not because she seeks revenge, but because she no longer seeks him. She has moved on not to another man, but to another version of herself. A version no longer edited for his comfort. A version rooted in her own cycles, her own mysteries, her own rising. She now orbits her own sun. She no longer revolves around the black hole of his ambivalence. And while she dances in her own becoming, he spirals. Because now the memory of her is no longer soft. It's sharp. It stings. Every time he sees her smile, he wonders who made her laugh. Every time he hears her name, his stomach twists with what he cannot hold the peace he once took for granted. Because now, it is gone. She is gone. And it is his fault. Not because she left quickly, but because she left quietly. That kind of leaving doesn't come from drama. It comes from clarity. The kind that only arrives after countless moments where she silenced her intuition, betrayed her own boundaries, swallowed her needs for the sake of not losing him. And finally, the price became too steep. The illusion shattered. She saw the truth. She was the only one showing up, and so she stopped. And in stopping, she became not bitter, not broken, but better, unrecognizable to the version of herself who once waited for him to pick her. That woman is no longer here, and he knows it. That's why the obsession begins. Not because she's trying to make him jealous. Not because she posts the right pictures or crafts the perfect caption. But because her energy is no longer his to feed on. He used to dine on her devotion like wine and bread Kazuo expected. Now he is starving. Because the soul starves without the sacred. And she was sacred. Not because she was perfect, but because she loved in a way few know how to anymore. Deeply. Fully. And he, drunk on his own ego, could not see it until the well ran dry. Now he digs into himself, looking for answers. And if he's wise, if he's ready, he will find more than pain. He will find himself. He will begin to understand the archetype he projected onto her, the Anima, the inner feminine he discerned, the part of his soul that she embodied, and which he cast out when it asked too much of him. This is his reckoning. And no, she will not be there to walk him through it. That is no longer her role. Her work was done the moment she stepped back and stopped absorbing his unprocessed wounds. Her silence, is not abandonment. It is initiation, a boundary drawn not in anger, but in love. And now, she moves differently, not with arrogance, but with a quiet knowing. She is no longer the girl in the wings waiting for her name to be called. She is center stage in her own life. She is the director, the lead, the writer, and the script no longer includes him as the protagonist. He is a chapter, a necessary one, perhaps, but not the whole story. And as her story unfolds, she no longer waits for validation. She no longer needs to be seen to feel visible. She is rooted, unshakable, whole. Her worth is not conditional. Her love is no longer currency. Her care is not for sale. Let him obsess. Let him regret. Let him remember her in every woman who is almost but not. Because now she understands. She was never too much. She was simply too real for a man still pretending. Now, the echoes of her leave fingerprints on everything he touches, not just in women, but in moments, those quiet intervals, where he is forced to sit with himself. When the noise dies down, when the attention fades, when the nights are cold and no performance is left to give, he remembers how she saw him, not the curated image he wore like armor, but the raw, trembling truth beneath it. She saw the parts of him he didn't yet understand, and held them gently, until he made her carry them alone. Now, those same parts feel like ghosts. Familiar, but distant. She's no longer there to hold the mirror. And so he begins to see the cracks through his own reflection. That is the gift of her departure. She forced him into confrontation. With himself. With the wounds. With the masks. With the boy who still hides in the corners of the man. This is not punishment. This is medicine. Bitter. Necessary. Transformational. You see, women like her don't just leave. They liberate. They force evolution in their absence. And this is her power. She did not burn his house down. She simply walked away from the fire she used to keep alive. And now, in the cold ashes, he must choose. Become worthy of the flame, or forever chase it in others who will never burn as brightly. He may try to find her again. To circle back. To revisit the ruins with flowers in hand and remorse in his eyes. But the woman she's become, she no longer lives there. She no longer needs his redemption arc to validate her own healing. Because she has seen the truth. The real truth. That her value is not measured by how much she is chased, but by how deeply she chooses herself. That love, in its highest form, is not performance, it is presence. And if a man cannot be with her, truly be with her emotionally, spiritually, vulnerably, then his desire means nothing. Obsession without accountability is just ego and heat. And she has no time for that. She has become fluent in her own silence. She has made peace with solitude. Not the kind that aches, but the kind that sings. The kind that whispers, "You are enough." Even when no one is watching. She no longer seeks company to distract her from herself. She is not lonely. She is selective. And he feels it. That is why he not because she rejected him, but because she refused to abandon herself for him. That kind of power, so deep, self-respect. It dismantles the illusion that women must earn love. It disrupts the belief that affection is transactional. It shows him what he cannot fake. And that kind of woman, she becomes unforgettable. Not because of how she looked, or what she did in bed, or the way she smiled in his direction, but because of how she left. Gracefully, quietly, completely, without malice, without a scene, without even a whisper of guilt. He may call it cold, but it was sacred. The coldness he feels now is not hers. It is his own shadow, the one he projected onto her for so long, the one he now must face. And oh, how heavy that reckoning becomes, when no one else is there to carry it for him. And she has stopped waiting for him to evolve. She no longer orbits his potential. She has done building futures in her mind with men who refuse to show up in the present. She is done watering gardens where nothing ever grows. Her care is no longer free. It is earned, not through grand gestures, but through realness, through consistency, through presence, through depth. And until a man can meet her there, he will only ever encounter the echo, never the essence. So let him pace the hallways of his memory. Let him read old messages like scripture. Let him stare at the door she closed and pray it opens again. It won't. Not because she doesn't still carry love, but because she now carries wisdom. And that wisdom has taught her this. Not every man who loses you deserves a second chance. Some only deserve to remember. There comes a silence that no longer waits, only watches. She doesn't run from the past. She's made peace with it, held it in her hands like cracked porcelain, studied every fracture, and blessed it. There is no more bitterness in her blood, only calm, only the quiet strength of someone who has nothing left to prove. And that is what kills him slowly. Not her anger but her peace. The way she smiles without him now. The way her eyes no longer search for his. The way her life continues not in spite of him, but utterly indifferent to his existence. For the first time, he sees the depth of her detachment, and it terrifies him, because deep down, he knows. He didn't just lose her presence, he lost access to her soul. He will try. Oh, he will try. He may come bearing promises like apologies polished, like silver coins. He may tell her he's changed, that he's ready now, that he sees what he was blind to before. And maybe, in some ways, he has changed. Maybe the storm she left behind cleared his skies. Maybe the silence taught him how to hear. Maybe he truly does feel everything now that he numbed back then. But it is too late. Not because she is cruel, not because she seeks to punish, but because she has risen, and where she stands now is too far from where he left her. He would have to build wings just to meet her. And even then, she no longer waits at the edge of the cliff. She has already taken flight. She is the phoenix now, reborn from the ashes of her own suppression. Her fire is not for warmth, alone it is for illumination. She sees clearly, no longer through the fog of longing or the haze of hope. She sees what it cost her, the energy spent holding space for someone who could not hold her, the silent tears, the quiet compromises, the bending, and she will never pay that price again. For too long, women have been taught to be gentle no matter the wound, to love him through his storm, to prove their loyalty through silence but she knows now, loyalty to others at the expense of self is not. Love it is erasure. And she has written herself back into her story. Every chapter now bends toward freedom, toward truth, toward the kind of love that meets her where she is, not demands she shrank to fit. She is not a lesson. She is not a bridge. She is not the rehearsal for his future wife. She is the main event, the destination, the sacred mystery, and only a man who knows how to treat a temple will ever be allowed inside. So let him remember her, as he rewrites himself. Let him wonder if he ever really knew her. Let him trace her name in the dust of old regrets. But she is no longer reachable through memory. She is a future now, a force, a field of blooming knowing. Her femininity is no longer a performance, it is a presence, and it bows for no one but divinity. She no longer hopes he returns. She no longer mourns the lost potential. She no longer fantasizes about what could have been, because what is already more than enough. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.